Christmas dinners in my family were always predictable. Too loud, too crowded, too much pretending. That night was no different. At first, the long dining table was packed, plates overlapping, elbows brushing, voices rising over one another. Laughter bounced off the walls. Wine glasses clinked. Someone had already turned the volume up too high on the old holiday playlist humming from the living room. The smell of roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, and gingerbread cookies wrapped the house in that warm, comforting illusion families like mine were very good at maintaining. I sat halfway down the table, fork in hand, a bite of turkey lifted just inches from my mouth. Across from me, my grandfather sat at the head of the table. Sidney. He had just returned that morning from a long business trip. Even in retirement, he still carried himself like a man used to command, straight-backed, sharp-eyed, quiet in a way that demanded attention. He'd barely spoken since sitting down, only nodding occasionally as conversations swirled around him. I didn't think much of it, not until his hand slammed down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Every wine glass trembled. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died instantly. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, my hand locked in place as if my body hadn't caught up to what had just happened. The silence that followed was absolute. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stared straight across the table, eyes hard, jaw set, and spoke slowly, each word sharp enough to cut through the festive air. "Why," he said, "is a complete stranger running the cold storage and logistics company in Texas that I bought for my granddaughter?" No one breathed. The Christmas lights blinked cheerfully in the corner, completely unaware they had become the backdrop to something breaking apart. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs it felt like it might give me away. I forced my face into confusion. What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sound real. "I don't even have $1 in my name. How could I possibly own a company?" Across the table, my father's hand tightened around the carving knife until his knuckles turned white. My mother's face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. My younger brother and his wife exchanged a quick glance. Too quick, too practiced, no one said a word. Grandpa leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. His voice dropped, calm and controlled, which somehow made it worse. "A few weeks ago," he continued, "an old business partner called me by mistake. Thought I was still involved in the company." He paused, letting the weight of that settle. "He congratulated me on the new owner." I swallowed. "New owner?" I repeated softly. "A man named David Carter," Grandpa said. "According to him, that man is now fully in charge." I let my eyes widen, my lips parting as if stunned. "David Cart." I whispered. "I've never even heard that name before." Inside, my thoughts were racing, but on the outside I stayed perfectly still, watching everyone else. The tension at the table was so thick it felt physical, like a pressure pushing in from all sides, before anyone could respond. There was a knock at the door, not a friendly tap, a firm, deliberate knock. Every head turned. Grandpa didn't move. He didn't react. He simply looked at my father and said, "We'll get to that." The knock came again. Someone finally stood to answer it, but before the door even opened, Grandpa reached down beside his chair and lifted his briefcase onto the table. The soft click of the latches sounded impossibly loud. He opened it. Inside was a thick stack of papers, neatly organized in labeled folders. He slid them across the table, stopping directly in front of me. "These," he said, tapping the top page, "are tax filings and ownership records my partner accidentally emailed me." My brother leaned forward immediately, face flushing as his eyes scanned the documents. "This has to be a mistake," he said quickly. "Probably another company with a similar name. That kind of thing happens all the time in Texas." His tone was too casual, too fast. My mother reached out and placed her hand gently on Grandpa's arm, smiling in that way she always did when she wanted to steer a conversation away from something uncomfortable. "Dad, you've been traveling nonstop," she said softly. "Jet lag can really mess with your memory. Let's not ruin Christmas over business confusion." My father nodded along, slicing another piece of turkey even though no one was eating anymore. "Exactly," he said. "This can wait. Tonight's about family." I stayed silent, letting the confusion play across my face. Then I spoke again quietly. "If this company was really in my name," I said, "why has no one ever told me about it?" My voice cracked just enough. The table went quiet again. Grandpa looked at me, his expression unreadable. That, he said slowly, is exactly the question. My brother shifted in his seat, muttering something about crossed wires and outdated records. His wife stayed silent, eyes fixed on her plate, pushing food around with her fork. My mother poured water into glasses no one touched. My father cleared his throat and suggested dessert. No one moved. Grandpa leaned back slightly and folded his hands. The partner assumed I knew, he continued. He talked about warehouse expansions, new refrigeration units, new trucking routes, said profits were up. Each word landed heavier than the last. I felt every eye flick toward me, then away again. I've been scraping by since college, I said quietly, living in a tiny apartment with broken AC, eating instant noodles most nights. No one interrupted me. One Christmas, I continued, all I could afford was a box of off-brand cookies from the dollar store, wrap them in newspaper, because I didn't have gift wrap. My mother's lips pressed together tightly. I looked around the table. If this was supposed to be my company, I asked, why was I never included, not once? The excuses started piling up. Grandpa didn't push yet. He just let the papers sit there, undeniable. Forks scraped plates. Glasses clinked nervously. No one met my eyes. Then Grandpa spoke again. Someone's been signing documents, he said calmly, and it wasn't her. He looked directly at my brother. Do you remember signing anything related to this company over the last few years? My brother blinked. Once. Twice. Then he set his glass down a little too hard. I signed a couple of minor authorization papers, he admitted. Just power of attorney stuff, Mom and Dad asked, routine things. Grandpa said nothing. Instead, he reached for his phone, made a short call. Come inside, he said into it, now. The front door opened moments later. A man in a dark suit stepped into the dining room, carrying a briefcase of his own, Grandpa's lawyer. He placed the briefcase on the table and snapped it open, and that was when I knew. Christmas dinner was over. The lawyer didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't announce himself or clear his throat dramatically. He simply stepped forward, placed his briefcase on the table beside Grandpa's, and opened it with calm precision, as if this were a routine meeting in a conference room, not a Christmas dinner imploding in real time. My grandfather nodded once. Proceed. The lawyer slid a single document forward. This, he said evenly, is an authorization form granting operational control over the cold storage company. He tapped the signature line, and this, he continued, is allegedly hers. Every eye turned toward me. I leaned forward slowly, studying the page as if seeing it for the first time. That's not my handwriting, I said quietly. Dad was quick to respond. Signatures change, he said. People don't always sign the same way. Mom nodded immediately. She was young, she added, probably rushed or nervous. The lawyer didn't argue. Instead, he slid out another sheet, and this is a verified signature from her bank record. Back down without drinking. That doesn't mean fraud, Dad said carefully. Replacement copies get printed all the time. Especially for state filings, Mom added quickly. Texas systems are notorious for backlog errors. My brother nodded, seizing the opening. And notary services mess up dates constantly, he said. It happens. I stayed quiet, confused, hurt, watching, then I spoke. If these papers gave someone control, I asked softly, what did that actually mean? Who was making decisions? Everyone talked at once. Routine oversight, just maintenance, contract renewals, temporary, protective. My grandfather raised a hand. Silence returned instantly. Temporary authority, he said slowly, does not explain an ownership transfer. He gestured toward the folder. These filings show a complete shift. No trust, no proxy, no conditional language. Sweat beaded on Dad's temple. That could be a technical classification, he said. Legal wording doesn't always reflect intent. Mom leaned toward me, her voice warm, practiced. We were protecting you, she said. You had just graduated. You were overwhelmed already. My brother nodded. Running a company like that would have crushed you back then. I swallowed. I didn't even know it existed, I said. That landed harder than anything else. The lawyer moved on. These, he said, pulling out a new stack, are email records. He laid them out one by one. Anonymous messages sent to recruiters, hiring managers, companies I had applied to straight out of college. I felt my chest tighten as he read excerpts aloud. Lacks commitment, abandons projects, creates unnecessary workplace conflict. My mother gasped softly. Those aren't. The lawyer held up a finger. The accounts were temporary, he said, but the IP address traces back to this residence. My brother spun toward Mom. You said it was necessary, he snapped. You told me it was for her own good. My sister-in-law leaned forward suddenly. I saw drafts, she said quietly, saved on his computer. My brother stared at her. Dad tried to intervene. Enough, he said. We did what we thought was best. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I just didn't want her so far away, she said. I wanted her safe. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was unraveling on its own. The lawyer arranged timestamps, lining them up with rejection emails I remembered too well, every missed opportunity, every unexplained silence, every we've decided to move forward with other candidates. My brother slumped back. I didn't think it would go this far, he muttered. The lawyer closed the folder. There's more, he said. My grandfather inhaled slowly. Before we continue, he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it, there's something else you should all know. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a sealed document. I updated my will. No one moved. No assets, H. E continued. Will pass to anyone at this table except her. The paper slid across the wood, certified, witnessed, final. My brother's face drained of color. Mom whispered his name. Dad said nothing. The lawyer looked up. And now, he said, we come to the sale. My stomach dropped. Sale? I repeated. He opened the final folder. The names stared back at me. David Carter, signed contracts, wire transfers, dates, amounts. The room tilted. My brother's shoulders sagged. And before anyone could stop him, he said, we were desperate. That was all it took. The word desperate hung in the air. No one moved. No one breathed. My brother stared down at the table, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of everything he'd been holding back finally crashed down on him. His hands trembled slightly as he rubbed them together, avoiding everyone's eyes. My mother whispered his name again. Knox. My grandfather didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Explain, he said. Knox swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he muttered. It was supposed to be temporary, just enough to get us through. Dad finally looked up. Through what? Grandpa asked. Silence stretched. Then Dad exhaled slowly like a man surrendering. My construction company was failing, he said. Suppliers were demanding payment. The bank was closing in. We were weeks away from foreclosure. Mom covered her mouth. We didn't want you to know, she said softly, eyes flicking toward me. We were trying to protect the family. I said nothing. The lawyer flipped to the next document. This is the purchase agreement, he said. Executed 18 months ago. He slid it forward. The signature glared back at me, not mine. Forgery? Grandpa asked calmly. The lawyer nodded. Forensic comparison shows a 99% match to Knox's handwriting. Knox didn't argue. He just nodded once. I signed it, he said quietly, but I didn't do it alone. All eyes turned to his wife. She flinched. I introduced the buyer, she said through tears. That's all, I swear. David Carter, Grandpa said. Why him? She wiped her face. He could close fast, no questions, no delays. The lawyer continued. Funds were wired into a joint account held by your parents, he said, turning toward Mom and Dad. Categorized as asset liquidation. Dad's hands clenched. We needed the money, he said. It was either that or lose everything. I finally spoke. You sold something that wasn't yours. Mom sobbed openly now. We thought we could fix it later, she said. Buy it back. Restore it before you ever knew. Grandpa stood slowly. I gave that company to secure her future, he said. You dismantled it to save yourselves. A knock echoed through the house. 3 sharp raps. Everyone froze. Grandpa nodded once. Come in. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, professional, calm. We're here regarding a report of suspected document, Frau. D, one said. We have a warrant to collect evidence. The lawyer handed over the folders. The other officer approached my brother first. Sir, he said, you're being served a summons. Then Dad, then another. Mom collapsed back into her chair. My brother stared at the paper in his hands, whispering apologies that came far too late. The officers finished, then turned toward me. You'll be contacted for further statements, one said gently. They left as quietly as they arrived. No one followed them. I stood. They chose their future, I said evenly. Years ago. No one argued. Christmas lights blinked in silence, and nothing would ever be the same again. The officer's footsteps faded down the driveway, but the sound stayed with me, long after the front door closed. Long after the cold night air rushed in and then disappeared again. The weight of what had just happened pressed down everyone left behind. No one spoke. My mother sat frozen in her chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Silent tears slipped down her face, dripping onto the untouched tablecloth. My father stared at the summons in front of him, like it was written in a language he couldn't understand. My brother hadn't moved at all, head bowed, shoulders slumped, paper trembling slightly between his fingers. Christmas music played softly from the living room. The irony was unbearable. Grandpa broke the silence first. "This is not a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "This is a pattern." No one contradicted him. "You interfered with her career," he continued. "You sold what wasn't yours. You forged documents. You lied for years." My mother reached across the table toward me, her hand shaking. "We were scared," she said weakly. "We didn't know what else to do." I looked at her hand and didn't take it. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said. "You just didn't expect to be caught." That broke something in the room. My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "We were under so much pressure," he said. "Every door was closing. We thought if we could just survive a little longer." "You survived," I replied. "I paid the price." No one had an answer for that. Grandpa gathered the documents methodically, stacking them back into folders like a man closing a chapter he never wanted to read in the first place. "My attorney will handle further communication," he said. "There will be no more family discussions about this." My brother looked up then, eyes red. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't think it would ruin you." I met his gaze. "You didn't think about me at all." That was the last thing I said to him. The rest of the night passed in fragments, no goodbyes, no hugs, no resolution. I left before dessert. The months that followed were worse than I imagined. Depositions, interviews, endless paperwork. I sat in sterile rooms under harsh fluorescent lights answering the same questions again and again. Dates, signatures, IMA, ILS, bank transfers. Each time, the story was pulled apart and examined like a specimen under glass. David Carter's legal team argued he'd purchased the company in good faith. The judge agreed the company was gone. What remained was partial restitution, structured payments spread over years, monitored closely, but nowhere near enough to undo the damage. Justice, I learned, was rarely complete. While my case dragged on, my family unraveled. My father's construction business collapsed under debt and legal fees, forcing liquidation. Equipment was seized. Contracts vanished. Decades of reputation evaporated in months. They sold the house I grew up in, the one with the big oak tree out front. My mother moved into a small rental on the edge of town. No decorations appeared that year. No Christmas lights. My brother faced separate consequences. Probation, restitution, a permanent mark on his record. His marriage didn't survive the fallout. I didn't attend the divorce hearing. I didn't attend anything. I started over. With what little settlement money I received, I built something new, smaller, humbler, one warehouse, a handful of refrigerated units, no safety net. I worked every angle, cold calls, trade shows, discounted contracts just to earn trust. Some weeks I wasn't sure I'd make payroll. Some nights I slept on a cot in the office, too tired to drive home. But it was mine. Every contract earned honestly. Every dollar accounted for. Grandpa stayed close. He moved into a nearby condo and stopped by often, coffee in hand, offering advice without ever taking control. He let me make mistakes, let me learn. The business grew slowly. One client became two became five. Then something unexpected happened. People started reaching out to me, strangers. They'd heard my story online. They were dealing with betrayals of their own, and for the first time since that Christmas night I realized what they took from me wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of something else. The rebuild didn't happen all at once. It came in small, unremarkable victories that would have meant nothing to anyone else. A client renewing a short-term contract instead of walking away. A driver calling to say a delivery went smoothly. A month where the numbers finally lined up and I didn't have to choose which bill could wait. I learned every corner of the business because I had to early mornings walking the warehouse floor, checking temperatures, inspecting seals, making sure nothing failed overnight. Afternoons buried in invoices and route planning. Evenings answering emails long after everyone else had gone home. There was no one to fall back on, and strangely, that felt freeing. Trust returned slowly, not in people but in myself. Grandpa visited often. He never interfered. He'd sit in the extra chair in my small office, coffee cooling in his hands, watching me work through problems. "You're doing fine," he'd say occasional. Don't rush it. We talked strategy, risk, fuel costs, vendor negotiations. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. The business stabilized. Then it started to grow. One warehouse turned into two. A second refrigerated truck joined the fleet. Clients began referring other clients. I hired carefully. People who showed up, people who kept their word. I paid bonuses when I could. Celebrated small milestones with shared meals and early closures. There was pride in building something clean, something untouched by the past. The messages started arriving late at night. At first, I thought they were spam. Then I read them. A woman in her 20s from Oklahoma. Her brother had transferred farmland left to her by their grandmother while she was away at nursing school, a man in Colorado. His parents redirected trust funds meant for his education, a sister in Florida, an aunt liquidated joint investment accounts without consent. They all sounded the same, confused, ashamed, overwhelmed. I recognized every emotion. I replied, not as a lawyer, not as an expert, just someone who had been there. I shared resources, explained steps, offered questions they should ask their attorneys, helped them understand what mattered and what didn't. No money ever changed hands. I did it because I knew what it felt like to stand in the dark without a map. One case resolved, then another. A handwritten letter arrived one afternoon. Thick paper, careful handwriting. The young woman from Oklahoma thanked me for helping her reclaim her land. She said she almost gave up before realizing she wasn't powerless. I sat in my office and cried, quietly. That's when I understood something important. What my family took from me had been real, but it hadn't destroyed me. It had shaped me. I never spoke to my parents again. Their apologies came through mutual acquaintances, short messages filled with regret and hope for reconciliation. I deleted them without reading, not out of anger, out of clarity. Boundaries weren't punishment, they were protection. My brother tried once. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Christmas changed after that. No big dinners, no forced smiles, just a small tree in the office, lights along the warehouse entrance for the team, a quiet meal with Grandpa. It was enough. The business continued expanding steadily, not explosively, intentionally. I sponsored local food bank drives, partnered with small farms that needed reliable cold storage but couldn't afford massive contracts. I slept better, laughed more, and for the first time felt proud without guilt attached. Grandpa watched it all with quiet satisfaction. One afternoon, as we reviewed numbers together, he smiled and said, "Justice rarely gives everything back, but growth does." I carried that with me. Time did what confrontation never could. It softened the sharpest edges, not by erasing what happened, but by placing it where it belonged. Behind me, a year passed. Then another. Legal proceedings ended quietly, not with dramatic victories, but with finality. Payments arrived on schedule, monitored and controlled, a reminder that accountability doesn't always look like restoration. Sometimes it looks like limits, like lines that can no longer be crossed. I accepted that. What mattered more was what came next. The business grew steadily, not because I chased scale, but because I chased consistency. Cold storage units multiplied one by one. Routes expanded carefully across central Texas corridors. Clients stayed because we delivered exactly what we promised. No more, no less. Integrity became our competitive edge. I stopped measuring success by what I'd lost and started measuring it by what I'd built without shortcuts. Early mornings became routine, walking the warehouse floor before sunrise, checking logs, talking with drivers before they headed out. Evenings were quieter. Paperwork, planning, sometimes just sitting in the office after everyone left, listening to the hum of refrigeration units that meant things were running the way they should. Grandpa remained a constant. He'd stop by mid-morning with coffee from the same local diner every time, settling into the extra chair without ceremony. We talked about markets, fuel volatility, supply chain shifts, sometimes about nothing at all. Once, while watching trucks pull out of the yard, he said something I never forgot. "Justice doesn't always return what was taken," he said, "but becoming someone stronger than before, that's the real victory." I understood then what he had given me wasn't just protection or inheritance, it was perspective. The messages never stopped completely. People kept finding my posts, my replies, my willingness to explain things no one had explained to me when I needed it most. I carved out time on weekends, reviewed documents, helped strangers understand options. Sometimes all I did was listen. That mattered more than advice. Each resolved case felt like quiet redemption, not erasing my past, but transforming it into something useful. Pain didn't vanish. It evolved. Christmas came again, and again. No bitterness this time, no forced gatherings or guarded smiles. Just a small tree in the office lobby. Lights strung along the warehouse entrance. A shared meal with employees who felt more like chosen family than obligation ever did. I didn't miss what was gone. I understood why it had to be. Forgiveness remained possible, but only where accountability existed. Without change, forgiveness was just another invitation to be hurt. Boundaries weren't cruelty, they were clarity. The absence of certain people created space for better ones. The betrayal that once defined everything became what it always should have been. A chapter, not the whole book. I stood on ground I'd earned, built something honest, lived without fear of the next revelation. And when I looked back at that Christmas night, the slammed hand, the frozen fork, the moment everything shattered, I no longer felt anger. I felt gratitude, because what they took showed me exactly who they were, and losing them showed me exactly who I could become.